Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week is Bill Hamilton. Bill is a senior legal skills professor at the University of Florida Levin School of Law. He is a veteran of 30 years of big law litigation. He's been teaching eDiscovery at Florida, first as an adjunct for 10 years and now as a full-time professor. The founder is a founder as well of the University of Florida Law eDiscovery Project, which includes the UF Law eDiscovery Conference, which will be taking place this March, the 23rd and 24th of March. In person, we hope, for the speakers, online for all attendees. This is the 9th conference we've put on together. It would have been the 10th, but for a year lost to COVID. Bill, thanks for joining us.
It's a real pleasure to be here with you, George.
So you and I have been busy this last week.
We've been having a great time last week. It's a very special occasion here at the University of Florida Levin College of Law. The administration did some really neat innovation, and about 3 or 4 years ago created what we call a compressed course. So they took 1 week out of the regular semester and made that a 1 week course. So students get 1 credit, but they can attend a course for 1 week. So we met with students for 3 hours a day, teaching a special course that you and I designed just for this year in this compressed course, which was titled Artificial Intelligence and Litigation Strategy. So we basically went at it together for 5 days in a row, 3 hours a day, with our students, introducing them to how artificial intelligence can improve the quality and performance of lawyers in the litigation process.
So we'll break this down. First, and I know the answers to these, but I'll ask anyway, why artificial intelligence in this part? It's not just an accident, is it?
Well, it's not just an accident. I think there's really a couple of reasons behind it. First of all, you and I have been talking about this for many years, and the use of technologies to advance and provide better client services, to increase the quest for justice, which is what the litigation process is all about. That dovetailed perfectly this year into a tremendous initiative by the University of Florida generally to make our students all across the board in every discipline as digitally literate as possible, especially with artificial intelligence. University of Florida wants to be known as the AI University, and it's not just that this is going to be done in the computer science department or in some other department. It's every department across the university on the undergraduate and graduate level is looking very closely and incorporating artificial intelligence into its curriculum and into its teaching methodologies in terms of preparing our students to go out in the future, which we think is not the future, but right now.
We've got this course, the AI and litigation strategies. It's not, however, the only AI course at UF Law, is it?
Not the only one at all. We have a whole series of courses that we teach featuring artificial intelligence. And the idea is to touch on uh, every topic. So right now we have artificial intelligence courses that are focused on artificial and medical technology. We have courses on artificial intelligence and its impact on the criminal justice system. We have survey courses on artificial intelligence, which talk about the legal issues that AI creates across many different industries. We have artificial intelligence and tax courses. The number, it goes on and on. The idea here is that we're trying to roll out a perception that all these fields are going to be impacted by the tremendous power of artificial intelligence, which has, and will continue to change the world at an accelerating pace. And what we're trying to do is make our students aware of that, yet, and at the same time, accelerate the ability of the law to respond to these challenges. As you and I know, George, from our work in electronic discovery, the law tends to be a cautious, lumbering process in terms of change. And that lumbering, cautious process is important, but sometimes it's got to move a little bit quicker. Sometimes it's got to be a little more adaptive. And what we're seeing now, I think across the board, with some dissatisfaction with tech companies, notwithstanding all the positives there, all the positives in medicine using artificial intelligence, automobiles using artificial intelligence, banking using artificial intelligence. There's problems on the other side of it. We have all kinds of issues that are arising that raise legal questions, and we want our lawyers as well as our students to be aware of those problems, to be on top of it, and respond to it now or near now, rather than waiting for these problems to overwhelm us when we don't have the legal tools and laws to deal with it.
And our course was AI and litigation, AI in litigation strategies.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
What's the litigation strategies side of that title?
Well, the litigation strategy side is that artificial intelligence is not just used for document production in the litigation process. Artificial intelligence, and what we mean by that is understanding your information better, understanding your data better, is critical at the beginning of the litigation process, all the way through the production process and into trial. So artificial intelligence is important in the early stage of the case where you're trying to get a handle on what's my data, how can I understand it, how can I decide what's important about my data. It's critical at the beginning of the case. Artificial intelligence, understood both as unsupervised machine learning and supervised machine learning, plays a critical role there. It also plays a critical role when I'm preparing for depositions. It plays a critical role when I'm getting ready for the Rule 26F conference with the other side, if I happen to be in federal court, in terms of developing a schedule that we're going to use, in terms of negotiating with the other side, how long the case is going to take, what kinds of data is going to be necessary, how we're going to process this data. All this it's critical that I have my hands on the information, and this is more important. This is the great thing about artificial intelligence, that the unsupervised learning as well as supervised learning associated with machine learning can slice and dice the data for me. So it's not like this takes me weeks or months to get ready for it. It's built right into our systems now, and it's right there for lawyers to use if we can just open up their oyster minds to make them understand that it's there and available and useful, and their clients are going to love it. They're going to love it because their clients are going to love them. And on top of that, it's going to facilitate and improve the quality of the judicial litigation process and give us a better shot at getting the better answer in the litigation process.
With all you described, it sounds like there's a risk that we wouldn't just open their oyster minds, but in the process of trying to open their oyster minds, crash and crush their oyster shells to smithereens. How did we narrow this down to 5 days worth of content and materials and the like for the students?
Well, the idea is, as you just suggested, that we built this on, George, was to kind of turn on the light bulbs. Here, if we can show a little bit of light and give some examples on how this is going to work, then the students are going to understand it better. So it wasn't as though we were preaching to the audience that wasn't interested at all. We were preaching to students who want to be successful. They want to distinguish themselves when they get out and practice. And what we did is we didn't just talk about it. We actually not only talked the talk, but we walked the walk with Reveal. So we had the students in the software that Reveal graciously provided for our students. And Reveal also helped build exercises for our students to do. So the way we structured the course is just wonderful. We would talk, for example, about the Rule 26F conference and explain the reason for it, some of the challenges of the Rule 26F conference that attorneys have faced in the past. And then we move into Reveal and talk about how Reveal makes this a much more simple, accurate process for the students to understand in terms of getting their hands around the data. For example, using a communications module in Reveal. That allows the person getting ready for the Rule 26F conference to know the scope of and the reach of the custodians in the case, which helps understand the volume of data that we're going to have. What we can do is look at the time frame of the communications as well. And you can say, well, yeah, we kind of do that in the old days back in the 80s and 90s, but now it's laid out right away for you in the software. So this is not rocket scientist stuff. So many of our students think AI, that's mathematics, it's some kind of calculus or derivatives or integrals or this or that. It's not like that at all. This is basically almost like searching for clothing or searching for music, on an application these days. So as soon as the students see this and realize that the interface of the platform, in this case Reveal, was so accessible, then they're going, well, yeah, we can do this. And they jumped right into the exercises. And frankly, I was impressed, George, that during the entire week, the students just didn't have any problem with it. In fact, it was more along the lines of, this exercise doesn't allow us to do much. We want to do more with Reveal. We want to do more with unsupervised learning. We want to, go in and look more at these dossiers that Reveal creates about various witnesses. So when we're preparing for depositions, we'll know what the hot topics are they're talking about. We'll know who the people they talk to most are about these critical topics. We can filter it according to the themes in the litigation that are important to us to build our deposition strategy. The students just love this, and they realize it was an enabling feature. And the thing that I love about it was, and it's been so frustrating over the years for an e-discovery industry, for us, and again, you and I have talked about this too many times, George, is that electronic discovery is for lawyers. It's not merely for technicians. It's not merely for paralegals. It's for the whole team. And the lawyer is part of that team. The lawyer's building the story. The lawyer knows what the story is. Now, you have other folks working with you that are incredibly important. I've worked all my life with the most wonderful paralegals, the most wonderful litigation support technologists. But we're the ones that are putting the story together. We're the ones that are creating the path that's going to work for our client and adjusting that path as we're going. So what AI is doing is it's allowing attorneys to be involved in this process right at the get-go and to get their hands in the data. This is really what frustrates attorneys. When I first started practicing, even the partners didn't say to the paralegals, look through the paper and tell me the good stuff. The partners were jumped into the paper. The problem is somehow, as we move from paper to data, the partners kind of got more reserved about that. They got a little less comfortable because they couldn't touch the paper and feel it, is what they were used to. And of course, there was lots more of it. And of course, you have metadata now. And they were, frankly, in many cases, just overwhelmed by this new source of information, this new information container.
The complexity of the tools they add to. I don't know how many attorneys I've talked with over the years, even recently, who'd said some variation of, I hope I can just make it to retirement without having to deal with this.
Yeah, exactly. So now things are changing, and the interface of the applications is becoming increasingly accessible to to every level of participant in the litigation process, and including partners. So, I think what AI is going to do is it's going to allow partners to sit down and take a look at this. I mean, George, who wouldn't want to, when you're taking a deposition, want to sit down in advance, look at Reveal and Reveal's dossier that it creates automatically, without even you doing anything, about the witness you're taking a deposition of, that tells you who he was talking to, who she was talking to, when they were having out of office conversations, when they were using aliases to communicate with one another, when they were talking about topics that were hot, and when there was high level of emotion and a high level of intensity compared to everyday stuff, and who else in the company was talking about the same kinds of topics in similar ways. I mean, this is information that is gold, for litigators. I mean, I look back on the depositions I took in my career and say, golly, I wish I would have had this back then, but now it's right there and it's available for the attorneys. And that's why we're doing it at law schools, because these are the attorneys that are going out the door in the next year or two. They're going to hit law firms and they're going to take the practice of law to the next level.
You say we're doing this at law schools. Do you know of anybody else who's offering a course like this one?
Well, I think as soon as word gets out, George,
Okay.
you're going to have a lot of people knocking on your door.
Or on your door.
On our door. Yeah. No, I don't know of anybody else that has. We've been a leader in Florida here for many years in doing this. And e-discovery education, we're kind of hopefully we have a reputation as a neutral broker in terms of how to do this and what to do. We tried to build that reputation with your help. So we're not talking about anything that's particular to any company. We have some companies that are in the lead, like Reveal, and we're just thrilled that Reveal's working with us at the University of Florida to make this happen. All I'm talking about is what's available for attorneys now.
The power of today's tools.
The power of today's tool. And, I'm thrilled that Reveal's on the cutting edge of that. And I'm just thrilled that Reveal has helped make this available to our students. What a gift. What generosity. And I want to, publicly thank you, because you work. I mean, I don't think you realize how hard it was to put together, even a compressed course. So, we had you working with it on the team. We had other members of your team working to build these exercises. Charles to build the exercise. He was just tremendous. He came in and visited the classes on Zoom, to help the students with the exercises and help us teach the exercises. And it was really a lot of fun. I mean, we just had a great time talking about like what the Rule 26F conference is, how you have to do that right to make sure the case gets off on the right platform, and then how Reveal can make that happen, how artificial intelligence makes it work, and then have the students go in and do it, in Reveal to make this happen. And I think it also showed students that to be a sophisticated practitioner, it's just not one tool. It's not like we were dissing keywords. The use of keywords was built into everything we did all week long. It's not just unsupervised machine learning. We did a lot of that all along. It's not just supervised machine learning. It's understanding that these tools are woven together. And for every task, it requires a creative effort to do it. And you can say, well, some attorneys are afraid of creative effort, but the really good ones and students love to be creative, with this stuff.
So insofar as it is appropriate to do so, tell us a bit about the students in the class.
Well, we had any number of different students in the class. We had international students originally from Brazil and from Venezuela, and from China that were in the class. We had other students that were actually political refugees that had been admitted with visas that allowed them to stay in the United States because of political persecution. And I thank our dean and our admissions team at the University of Florida, Levin College of Law, for creating this tremendous diversity in our student body. And then we had, men, women that were intent to be leaders. We had individuals coming who had philosophy majors like myself, and other individuals that came out of hard science backgrounds that were participating in the course. And that was a great thing about it. Everyone was contributing to the discussion. And whenever you're teaching, there's always this little bit of concern about, well, geez, I hope I have enough data and information to talk about what happens if it gets very quiet. And, it never got quiet. We were basically closing down after 3 hours every day, and everyone was there. We have to leave now. Was kind of the general attitude on us, as well as on the students. So I think it was just an all around positive experience for everybody.
So do you think we cracked open those oyster minds?
Oh, I have no doubt about it. It's just one of the great things about being an educator, is that you see people get excited, you see them get enthusiastic, and you realize you're giving them new skills and opening up horizons that they hadn't seen before. And I think we opened up a lot of horizons for a lot of students over the past week when we did this compressed course.
Just off the top of your head, what do you think for some of the key takeaways were? The things they'll walk away from and remember and hopefully put into practice.
Well, I don't think there's any one particular thing, George. I think we did all week long. We did any number of things all week long. The first couple of days we focused on doing communications analysis, which shows not merely who's talking to whom, but when they're talking, and more importantly, how they're talking, and who else they're talking to in a similar sort of way during what time frames. All this, again, is information that Reveal presents right away, and it's easily accessible to the students. They could see that, and I think they said, wow, we can play with this and understand the information better and quicker and get to the important stuff. Then we went to sentiment analysis, which all of a sudden they see, well, they're yelling at one another now, or they're happy with one another now, or they're talking out of hours now about hot topics. Wow, where the lights were starting to go off when they could say, this is a lot richer than what I even imagined. And then we talked about image analysis, which I think really caught their attention. That, wow, you can go through the images, which have always been a little bit of a frustrating point for us in e-discovery. You can go through the images, and all of a sudden they're being automatically labeled by Reveal in terms of really relatively narrow characters. And we had a fun time with the dog and muffins. Some of the audience may have seen this. It came out about 4 years or so ago, of a whole series of chihuahuas and muffins. So we said to the students, you think you can separate the chihuahuas from the muffins? And the students are kind of looking at that. Well, I think that's little pictures of chihuahua, and I think that's a muffin. They all look pretty similar to me too. Then we said, all right, let's run it through Reveal and see what happens. Reveal hit it 100%. So they go, geez, this is really exciting stuff. And then we talked about how to use it. It's not really fun, but how to use it when you're trying to identify documents in construction litigation that have this figure, this construction figure, that construction figure. How do you find documents that have images of people in them? So, and there's 1,000 different topics that you can search for. So they were very excited about image analysis. I thought that was a big thing. But then I think the other thing they were excited about was, they're not alone with these. So too often we think of the rules of civil procedure as some kinds of barriers. Instead of it being a vehicle to do things, it becomes a kind of obligation or barrier. So, of course, what we always try and do here at the law school is explain these are not barriers, these are opportunities for you to advance the case, advance the interest of your client, to educate the court and do other kinds of things. So all of a sudden, you have a Rule 26F conference. Instead of this being, well, how do I do it? How do I go about it? Is this drudgery? I'm worried I'm going to get myself in trouble. So much of the time as lawyers, we're thinking in the back of our minds, how do I stay out of trouble? You think we do that as lawyers. Law students are that's front and center.
Even more so.
On their exactly front and center on their mind. But all of a sudden now the Rule 26F conference becomes something lighter. And maybe the heaviness. That's a good way of thinking about it. I think is the heaviness of litigation all of a sudden got lighter for our students with the data and to be able to handle the data and utilize the data. So who cares if we have a terabyte of information? That's wonderful. This is evidence. And now I've got the technology from Reveal and other companies to cut through and handle this information in a way that makes it richer. Craig Ball has written about this, is that, he's always said, how can attorneys, litigators, be complaining about too much evidence? Well, the problem is They complained about too much evidence because it was deemed to be drudgery and difficult to find it, and hours and hours. Now it's all changing with artificial intelligence, both unsupervised and supervised machine learning. And we expanded that definition of artificial intelligence too. Too often someone thinks of it as just TAR 1.0 or maybe even TAR 2.0. You know, artificial intelligence is a broad topic in terms of natural language processing and in terms of other tools that really were brought to the fore for the students. So all of a sudden, these become projects that we have the tools to tackle. I mean, think about, you know, taking a law student and saying, well, what you have to do is you're going to have to go out in the world and build a house. And we're going to show you, you know, what an architectural design looks like. And you just have to do it. That sounds pretty intimidating to me. But, you know, on the other hand, if we say, well, here are the tools to do it, you know, here's where you get the equipment, here are the tools, it's not going to be difficult at all. You say, I can build that. That's not a huge problem. So that's the kind of, I think, freedom. This is another way of looking at it. That's the kind of liberation of freedom and creative impulses that this technology that we were showing the students, and they get to put their hands in and play with. And that, I think that's the important point for pedagogical purposes. It's just not enough to talk about this because, you know, one, who wants to listen to an old guy like me talk about stuff? You know, so always take it with a grain of salt. I can remember when I was their age, our slogan was you couldn't trust anybody over 30. So
you're not over 30, are you?
I'm just getting there. So, you know, we got to be a little careful about that. So, yeah, they don't want to listen to some, you know, some guys, you know, my age telling them what to do about life. So we don't do that. We say, look, this is something. In fact, they talk about the fact that it was more difficult for me and the struggles that I had. And then they say, you know, and here's what we can do now, which would be fine. But, you know, students get a little tired after a while of hearing old time stories, but then we throw them into Reveal and it's like, wow, let's go get it. And what it does is Reveal's now structured in a way that students begin to intuitively understand it because of their facility with software in general. That really wasn't part of my generation. You know, you put an attorney my age in front of years ago in front of a computer or a e-discovery program. It's like, oh my gosh, what buttons do I press? What are these? What's this grid I'm seeing in front of me? You know, what's this coding column on the left, and what's all this metadata on the right? And this is, oh my goodness, how do I relate to this? But now the students, you know, they've dealt with Facebook, they dealt with all kinds of Instagram, they dealt with all kinds of uploading, they've done filtering themselves, etc. This kind of is coming a little easier to them.
It's a bit more familiar to them.
It is much more familiar to them, and I think that's the great thing that what Reveal has done with its platform is it's made it so that it's easily approachable.
So, two questions as we come to a close.
We have to close?
I know. First, you brought back, and it's not even a question, but rather a request for you to describe. You brought back into the classroom a perennial favorite, the green and yellow boxes. Okay, what was that about?
Well, again, it's just a visual demonstration. And again, we want the students to be able to talk the talk, but we want them to walk the walk. And there's an in-between between talking and using the actual software, which is using a demonstration model that explains what the software is doing. So we had that in-between model that we use where we can demonstrate what precision is. So here's a search. We got so many green boxes, which are basically the responsive documents, so many of the yellow documents. Let's measure precision and recall based upon that. How can we refine it? And then, of course, the next thing we do is we go into technology-assisted review, and we basically show how, yeah, the computer has shown these two documents are green, and all of a sudden, application, algorithm, what are you going to do with that? And then we shuffle the boxes and everything begins moving towards the front.
And each box is what, about 13 inches on the side, something like that?
Yeah, just a box that we can handle. There's nothing in it. It's light. It's just painted. And the students begin to visually see what's happening inside the application, if you will, that essentially the good stuff is beginning to move up. And then we can get into a wonderful discussion at that point about ranking And when you get into discussion about ranking, it allows you to discuss proportionality, which is a critical concept, and cost, and how we reduce it, and how you interact with clients better this way, and all kinds of other issues in terms of the practice of law. So in many ways, in this 1 week, I felt like we were giving the students a real introduction to the practice of law and what it's like now and how it's going to be in the future, and how artificial intelligence is going to really create a vehicle, one, to communicate better with clients, to communicate better with the court, and to understand our data in ways that are less expensive, more efficient, and produce better results for the client and for the judicial process.
So my final question,
Yeah.
now that we've done this course, worked up this content, what next with all of this?
Well, we've got to sit down. We just did this last week. We've got to sit down and take a look at what worked best. Can it be expanded? I mean, it seems to me we just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of, one, the size of the exercises and the scope of the exercises. I teach an e-discovery course every semester. So what we need to talk about is integrating these principles and these experiences even deeper into my regular, e-discovery course. That's the goal of the future.
There we go. Well, thanks, Bill. Bill Hamilton is a senior legal skills professor and the executive director of the e-discovery project at the University of Florida Levin School of Law. I am George Socha. This has been e-discovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thanks for joining us today, and please come back for another episode next Friday. Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you, George. A pleasure being here.
Always.